Rick Wingender, an experienced e-commerce professional, shares his journey in the industry and his passion for helping small businesses succeed. He discusses his background in e-commerce, including his involvement with the Green Bay Packers as a minor shareholder. Rick explains the challenges and mistakes he often sees in the SMB market and emphasizes the importance of having realistic expectations. He also highlights the skills and foundational knowledge necessary for e-commerce leaders to thrive. Rick also highlights the major trends in e-commerce, including AI and cybersecurity. In addition, Rick shares his proud moments in his career, such as launching Secret City's e-commerce website and developing several successful new businesses. He reveals fun facts about himself and where people can find him for freelance consulting. Now let's get started. Welcome to the Ecom Pulse, your heartbeat to the world of e-commerce. I'm your host, Eitan Kotter. Join us as we meet with industry leaders, marketing experts, and the innovative minds behind the tech that is shaping the e-commerce future. So plug in, gear up, and get ready for a pulse-pounding journey into the heart of e-commerce. Rick, thank you so much for your time. How are you?
I'm great. I'm not sure if I figured out how to say your name. Is it Eitan? Eitan?
It's Eitan.
Eitan.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
but I want to listen. Please say it. Eitan.
Eitan.
Yes. Very nice. Very nice.
Great. I'm never very good with names. That's why I don't put my own last name on there.
Yeah.
So because it's always a challenge. But anyway, great to be here and thank you for having me.
Yeah. I can call you Yoda, right? I know it's your nickname.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you comfortable with that? Yeah.
Yeah. People call me that all the time.
Okay. Good. So plenty of things to discuss today, but I want to start with Green Bay Packers, okay? I know you're a minor shareholder. Tell us the story. That's a great start.
Yeah, well, where I'm from, everybody bleeds green and gold. We're all big Packer fans. It's the one thing that everybody in the state of Wisconsin can agree on. We all love the Packers, and so when the Packers needed to make some money one year, about 12 years ago, they issued a bunch of stock, and my wife and I both bought some stock, and now the stock certificates hang on our kitchen wall. So it's pretty cool. It's a nice thing to talk about, and gives me a good excuse to never miss a game.
Never miss a game. That's like the next level of being a fan, right? It's beyond emotional connection to the team, right? That's your shareholder.
I watch all the videos. I study the stories. I go to the Green Bay Packer Hall of Fame. I'm into it.
Really? So how is Wisconsin, Rick?
Wisconsin's a great state, like I mentioned to you earlier, in comparison with some of the other states surrounding us, we like it here. I grew up here, moved away a few times, came back, moved away, came back again, and you never know what the future holds, but hopefully I might retire here. So
okay, sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, it's a beautiful state. If you've never been here, it's beautiful.
Yeah, sure. So, but what brings you into e-commerce, Rick?
Oh, I've been in e-com for a really long time. You could say I'm one of the early pioneers. So, back in 1994, I was reading an article, and I think it was Newsweek, and I saw on the cover of this story about some guy named Jeff Bezos. And you may have heard of him. He started this little company, and I started following it and became kind of like a Jeff Bezos groupie. And over the years, I've really developed my e-com passion and experiences and all of that. And I guess if you want to kind of tell a really quick kind of interesting story, I think it's interesting anyway.
Yeah.
Your listeners may not, but we'll see. So I used to work for a little company called Circuit City, which at the time was a huge company here in the States, and no longer exists, but that's not my fault. And I started out as a store manager, a bricks and mortar store manager with them, but I was already really into really wanting to learn more and more about e-commerce, and so while I was a store manager, I actually wrote the code for CircuitCity.com's very first homepage and website ever. I wrote just a few pages worth of HTML code. and now I'm going to show my age. I put it up, or sent it to my future boss on a zip disk to our corporate headquarters, where they promptly uploaded it and made it our very first website ever. And so
Wow.
after I finished my time as a store manager, I actually got promoted and became a buyer. I was a computer buyer at Circuit City in our corporate offices in Richmond, Virginia, and did that for a couple of years. And then, but I kept that relationship going with George, the guy who would become my next boss in e-commerce, my first real e-commerce job. And so he was employee number one, I was employee number two. And after finishing off my time as the laptop computer buyer, I moved over to the e-com team, and we relaunched CircuitCity.com as an e-commerce enabled website. That was in 1999, and I've been doing e-commerce ever since.
Amazing. I would love to see that first Secret City webpage. I hope you have it somewhere.
Every once in a while, I go to the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine,
yes,
and I'll take a look at it. Unfortunately, the data there is really inconsistent.
Okay.
So it doesn't really have all the pages, and there's so many of the elements are missing. But yeah, I wish it was all there. But that was a really fun time. I felt like we were really doing some new stuff, and it was all really exciting and cool.
Yeah. So you started the brick and mortar, then you moved to online, obviously, with e-commerce. What is this? How this transition has evolved? I mean, why do you made this transition, and what was the story there?
Well, so I guess that's interesting. I think e-com is really super interesting for me because it combines several things that are really exciting and interesting to me in a professional sense. And what I mean by that is, number one, I love consumer behavior. I just got done studying consumer neuroscience, or neuromarketing, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always loved consumer behavior, and that goes back to my bricks and mortar days when I was walked through the store by one of my mentors, my district manager, and he is God's gift to visual display merchandising, and a lot of what he taught me carries over into, and people don't realize this, but that's a bricks and mortar skill that does transfer over to e-commerce. And so so I was able to bring that with me, so the interest in consumer neuroscience, consumer behavior, and the visual display merchandising, and then my merchandising background, and I just love the ability to watch people, listen to people, make decisions. What makes consumers tick? What makes them decide to open up their wallets and give us all their money?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get good at that, then you can make a pretty nice business out of it. And so I've spent a lot of years doing exactly that, and doing it on a freelance basis in addition to my regular jobs.
Yeah. I mean, you've been doing digital transformation, platform replatforming, right? And also a lot of, let's say, the front end side, being a fractional CMO, making all the digital marketing decision. How come you're so passionate about all these aspects? It's not a traditional way of doing things, right? It's like you are all over the place.
Yeah.
In a good way, of course, right?
Yeah. So I think I'll blame my mom for some of that. Yeah, I'm going to blame my mom. See, we grew up, we were not rich by any stretch of the imagination. We're pretty poor, actually. And, and I look back to my mom as I looked at the difficulties that she had and the job that she had. And she went to work every day in a factory and was doing basically the same thing all day long, every day. And I thought, this is not the kind of job that I want, the kind of life that I want. I want something where I'm doing something different all the time. One day I can be working on some strategic issue. The next day or that afternoon, I can be rolling up my sleeves. You see, I literally do roll up my sleeves.
Yeah.
and push some buttons or pack some boxes. My career is kind of full of that, where I'm doing, one thing that is vastly, vastly different from something that I'm doing later in the day or the next day, and I like that. So that's really all consciously by design.
Mm-hmm.
I just never wanted to get pigeonholed into one little thing. And e-com is I like to tell people that e-commerce is the most cross-functional job you will ever have in your life. I mean, because there's aspects of legal, there's aspects of human resources, there's in leadership, and there's aspects of merchandising and marketing and IT. You think of any business discipline, and somehow it touches e-commerce. Now, you can't necessarily say that with, say, accounting or finance or law. All of those, you're kind of doing pretty much the same thing. I meet with a lot of different people, different types of people, different backgrounds, and I really enjoy that.
Yes. Yeah. So, Rick, aka Yoda, tell us what you do today. I mean, I know that you're doing a lot in e-commerce and working with a lot of companies. When was that transition from, being part of a bigger organization to launching your own business?
Yeah. So I get it's been an evolution.
Mm-hmm.
There's another story here, and I don't think that we have time to go into this whole story. But
I like stories.
I'm a huge storyteller. I have a ton of stories.
Yes.
But when I was in college, I was going to school full time and working full time. I was working for another little company you may have heard of called Best Buy, and I was kind of a dual role guy. I was managing the computer department, selling computers, and at the same time, I was also the store's computer tech support guy. And so,
okay.
I took a lot of phone calls and rewrote a lot of config sys and auto exec batch files over the phone and did things like that. And that kind of morphed into people coming in and saying, "Hey, I just bought a computer. Can you come to my house and train me?" And then one day that led to a consulting job where a guy said, "Hey, I just bought 5 computers. I own 5 gas stations, and I want to be able to remote in. I want to be able to see the data from home on all of these computers." And I said, "Yeah, I can do that."
Wow.
And so that was how the business got born. So I actually started out more technical than I am now. I was building like little networks using Lantastic and Windows for Workgroups. And neither of those products exists anymore. But and so I did that for several years, and then around in 2007, I joined this other company. I had just finished my MBA, and joined this company called Jewelry Television in Tennessee, and then the Great Recession, kicked in, and it was about that time that I felt like, okay, I've got a good amount of e-commerce experience, but it's been working with bigger companies that have bigger, better resources. And so I thought, hey, there's an opportunity here in Tennessee to start kind of morphing my business into e-commerce and digital marketing, but I could also help people, small businesses. So I was really focusing on small businesses and being able to leverage not only my e-commerce background, but also my merchandising background as well. And so I got a few jobs and then that was great. So really around 2008 or so is when I really got away from all the technical stuff and really started focusing on digital marketing and e-commerce and online merchandising and consulting for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and helping them, grow these little businesses.
Yes.
And I've been doing that mostly on the side ever since.
I'm very interested in this, SMB sector of the market, specifically on trying to understand the challenges. And I would love to learn from you if their challenges are still the same like 16 years ago or today. How challenges have evolved, throughout those years.
It's so funny that excuse me. It's so funny that you say that, because one of the things that characterizes what I do is the movie 50 First Dates. Are you familiar with that movie? No? Okay. So 50 First Dates, just really quick. The guy has a girlfriend, and I don't know what happened to her. She got hit on the head or something and lost her memory. And so every day he wakes up, or every day she wakes up, she's forgotten everything about her life, including her boyfriend. So he creates this videotape, and first thing she sees is a note on the TV. It says, put in VCR, again, showing you how old this is, but put in the VCR and watch this tape. And he goes on the video, he explains to her, I'm your boyfriend and this is your life and all that. And dealing with small businesses, owners of small businesses, entrepreneurs, especially if it's a startup, it's always kind of the same. It's always the same story. They don't know what they don't know. And so you spend a lot of your initial time with them explaining all the aspects of merchandising if they're selling something, and you explain, how do you get started in e-commerce? What does it take? What does it take to build a website? So that aspect of it has really not changed all that much, because the people that I'm usually dealing with, not always, but usually dealing with, they don't have that background. They're usually more of a product type of person. They've invented something, or they've gotten really good at some aspect of merchandising. What has changed is e-commerce itself. Like, the platforms have gotten a lot more sophisticated. Google Ads and the social media space is totally different now than it was back in 2007, 2008, and I could go on and on. But that's what's changed. But the people themselves and the relationships and what they want to know has been pretty consistent, actually.
Yeah. So what do you do with them? I mean, you're working with them on the tech stack side, on the digital marketing side, on product market fit, on staffing. What are the areas that you try to help with?
Yeah, actually, all of those. I would tell you that probably. I guess I'll give you a list of like 2, 3, 4 different things off the top of my head that are the most common things. So the one most common thing is, what do I need to do to build a website? How do I go about doing, what do I need to do to sell product online? So there's that. I actually just gave a presentation to the Small Business Development Council. I always forget what the C stands for. Small Business Development Course Career Center. I think it's Center at the University of Wisconsin, which was directed at small business owners. And the speech that I gave was all about, as a new business or as a small business owner, should I launch an Amazon business first, or a website first, or do them simultaneously? And so that's why I spent a few hours.
It's a big one. Yeah,
talking about that topic. Another one, and this one for me is really fun. I don't know why. It's just kind of weird. But you mentioned staffing and structuring. That's something that I talk about quite often. In fact, that topic has gotten me a couple of jobs. So a couple of times I've actually been hired as a result of my consulting. I had an experience. My experience at Jewelry Television was very formative, and I've actually been influenced by a lot of different influences, really. But I think Jewelry Television had the best structure for e-commerce. And when I say that, I'm talking about a couple of things. I'm talking about how they structured the e-commerce team, which is really more of a marketing / e-commerce team. There's marketing people, there's web developers, web designers, and there's product owners, and there's merchants on that team, all reporting up to a vice president of e-commerce. And then that person reports to the CEO, doesn't report to the CMO, or does not report to the IT VP. So they've really got so that was very influential on my thinking. And that's something that I talk about. And with small businesses, they don't have the resources of a Jewelry Television, or a company's bigger than that even. So I talk about skill sets. I lay out an org chart, and I say, in a perfect world, you'd have the money and resources to be able to staff this department, and it would have, these 30 people. But you have the budget for 3. So instead, let's just talk about the skills that each of these positions would bring. And then let's talk about prioritizing, and let's talk about what 3-year plan looks like, or 4-year plan, or 5-year plan. What does that look like in terms of hiring and skill set development? So that's another really common one. A third thing that I get small business owners asking me about is, just to do a website audit. Can you go through our website? Can you look at the SEO? Can you look at the UI, UX, the usability of the website? Can you look at, all the things that go into what would make a customer convert? on the website in terms of its performance and friendliness and all sorts of things. So that's another thing that I talk about, quite a bit. And then you have some companies that want you to actually do the work, hands-on, and that's fine. And sometimes they want me to find agencies for them, help them vet agencies, to actually do the work. And sometimes they just want advice. Just sit there a couple hours a week and just give my feedback on issues that they're having or that they think they're about to have.
Yeah. And what are some of the, let's say, probably mistakes or that you see that these leaders or owners are doing right in the SMB market specifically?
I would say having unrealistic expectations. And you see this in companies of all sizes. I see this in Fortune 500. I see it in really small businesses. And it's because, the executives at any level, they don't, even e-commerce has been around now for 25 years. But even so, most of them just don't have that background. They're, by trade, they're accountants or merchants or there's something else. And so they don't really have a good, realistic understanding or expectation of the people that are working for them in e-commerce and digital marketing, or even digital product management as well. Whenever I talk about e-commerce, I always talk about digital marketing and online merchandising and digital product management and strategy. It's kind of like my four-legged stool. And then I talk about all of that in terms of people, processes, technology. So that's the framework that I like to use when I'm talking with people about what they're trying to do. But reality has to sink in at some point. And it's really funny when you look at e-commerce director job descriptions, for example. If you go into LinkedIn and you read a few of them, and if you've been doing this for any length of time, you start going, oh my God, this person just doesn't understand what they're asking for. Because, one of the things that I see, this makes me cringe a lot, is I'll see a job posting for e-commerce director, and they want this person to be able to code in HTML and CSS and JavaScript.
Wow.
And they want them to know SQL, and they want them to know all the digital marketing and social media marketing and email marketing, and they want them to be a good merchant and have inventory, knowledge of inventory processes. And I look at it and I go, that's not a job I would apply for, because the expectations are too broad, and they don't. It just tells me that company or that owner, that executive, doesn't understand all of the functionalities, the skills that are needed for a complete e-commerce operation. So what I try to do is spend time, initially, whether it's a new job or a new consulting engagement, one of the first things that I like to do is sit down with that person or maybe it's several people and just start asking a lot of questions, gauging their understanding of what it takes to make e-commerce function, to make e-commerce profitable, and to prevent them from getting frustrated from the productivity or the output of the person or people that they're hiring. So I will sit there and one of the first things that I do is I pull out an org chart, and that org chart is designed to show the skills needed and give you kind of an idea of the reporting structures, who reports to who does what, how much time they spend on things. Of course, that depends on the size of your business. So it's really all about listening first, and then educating second, and then setting the proper expectations, and make sure that they don't go off and don't go kill their new hire.
Yeah,
which happens all the time. So
yeah. So according to your experience, what's what it takes to be a good e-commerce leader? I mean, looking to 2024 and a few years ahead, what do you think are the skill set or some of the expertise that are required for the best, let's say, optimized skill sets for the e-commerce leaders?
Yeah, boy, great question. I think that we can go in a couple of different directions on this one. So the first thing that I like to talk about in terms of being successful in e-commerce from a operator standpoint, from a employee standpoint, is having a good grasp of fundamentals, basics, foundational skills. So what I say next, I know, can I say piss off? Is that
yeah? We'll
I don't know what I
put
can say.
explicit sign in this episode. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what I'm going to say next might piss off some people, but in my experience, you cannot go and get an English degree and think that you're going to be a successful marketer. Having good communication skills is a huge benefit. That's hugely important, but it doesn't really prepare you. I see this. I'll give you an example. I see this all the time. There was a client that I had a couple of years back. It was for a footwear accessory company.
Mm-hmm.
They made insoles or supports, and they hired this guy and they gave him the job title of director of e-commerce. And he was not a director of e-commerce. I'm sorry. He was too junior, not seasoned enough, not experienced enough, and didn't have the educational background.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing he really could do was he knew Facebook advertising. Okay, he knew Facebook inside and out. And I'm like, okay, well that's great, but there's a lot more to digital marketing than just Facebook. And he wasn't doing any of that. He wasn't involved in the Google Ads program at all. He wasn't involved in the email marketing at all. He didn't do content development at all. Other people did that, or they didn't do it at all. So, and being a director of e-commerce also includes digital product management, the development and improvement of your usability, et cetera, of your website. And strategically, he was not really involved there either. And he didn't really, I forget what his degree was. It wasn't marketing, and it wasn't computer science, and it wasn't anything related to e-commerce. That's all I remember. And I thought, he doesn't have the foundational skills to really develop into a good director of e-commerce. I think that you have to start with at least that. The 4 Ps of marketing, it may be cliche, but product, price, place, promotion. They matter in a traditional sense in offline world, but they still matter they still matter in digital marketing. They still matter in digital merchandising as well. And so, your English majors are going to be at a significant disadvantage if they don't have that educational background. It kind of marketers, we're some of us are kind of thin-skinned, because we deal with CFOs and COOs and other people in the organization, and they say, well, anybody can do marketing. Marketing's easy. It's just throwing an ad up there, right? Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's all it is, really. So I'm a big advocate of, if you want to be successful in e-com, you really should start out with developing those foundational skills in marketing, and then having some background in computer science, or at least in some basic coding like HTML and CSS and JavaScript, depending on what you're doing. But usability,
yes.
those are kind of linked to usability eventually. So I'll stop talking about that. There was another way I was going to answer the question, and now I forgot what it was.
That's okay. You mentioned education, right? And I think we need to do a short pause here. You started as a computer science. Then you did like 2 degrees in marketing, right? MA, MSc in marketing and economics. You are even chief digital officer graduate, right? With Carnegie Mellon. So this is also your mother's, or do I need to invite her for the episode as well, or what's going on here? From where is this passion for education?
That's that. I know you said that facetiously, but you're kind of right. You're kind of right in that. Just like I didn't want to get pigeonholed into one thing, I also wanted to. I've always had this romantic idea of being this 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 Renaissance guy, right? Where I know something about everything, and
Yes.
I'm probably the most intellectually curious guy that you've ever met. So
Wow.
I started out thinking that I wanted to do something related to computers and programming and all that stuff, and that's how I got into selling computers at Best Buy and became the tech support guy at Best Buy, and how I got into setting up networks and all that. And then I discovered, the potential of selling online in e-commerce, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And then I thought, okay, well, what do you need to do to be successful? Well, you, you need you need more technical knowledge, or at least a technical aptitude. You need to be able, the most important thing really is not that you can be a programmer, but that you are able to have intelligent conversations with programmers. You've got to be able to understand what they're saying, and you've got to be able to explain yourself in. You got to kind of at least meet them halfway,
Hmm.
and be able to speak to them intelligently. And so that's a skill that I have. I think it's not one that is talked about very often, but it's one that I'm really really proud of. That I have is that ability to communicate with. I can talk with a technical guy in a meeting in the morning, and then an hour later I can be talking to the CEO and basically convey the same information, but in a executive digestible kind of way. And
Yeah.
and that's a skill that I think today's kids, they just simply don't have at all. So there's that, and then marketing. Well, e-commerce is still about trying to get people to separate themselves from their money, and so a good understanding of pricing behavior, consumer behavior, and promotional messaging, all that stuff. It's all very important in e-com, and so I wanted to. And I find that stuff fascinating. So I wanted to make sure that I had a good background in that, and it's not just about getting the degrees. It's really about in order. When I say it's really about, I mean improving your game is really about paying attention to people, i.e., customers, and watching and listening to them, and
Hmm.
evaluating their behavior. But it's also about attaching yourself in a kind of a mentor-mentee relationship with a certain person. The one guy in my career who I learned so much from. His name is Mike Keski,
Hmm.
and Mike was my district manager when I worked at Best Buy. I was a young guy, and Mike would come up to my store um, every month, and he would spend time with me walking around the store and showing me things and telling me what he sees through a customer's eye. So the first thing he taught was empathy. So
Wow.
look at your store and your visual merchandising and your pricing and your promotions, everything. Look at it through your customer's viewpoint. And it was such a lot of practical knowledge, but it was really super fascinating. And it was great that he would spend the time with me to do that, which is so rare, nowadays. So he's someone who I am forever indebted to. The degrees are one thing, but that experience is just invaluable
Yes.
to me. And then lastly, you mentioned it. The Chief Digital Officer program is kind of like a capstone program for my entire educational career, and it's all about digital transformation, and it's
Hmm.
about looking at processes for various types of companies, whether it's a retailer or a manufacturer, looking at everything that they do entirely from a new perspective, a digital perspective. How would you do this in the future, or if you were designing a company from the ground up and you had no manual or human processes, what would you do?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, the Carnegie Mellon University is a great school. It's got a long history and very famous for UI, UX, and those kinds of programs. And this program, the Chief Digital Officer program, was just everything was so new to me, and I thought I had seen everything,
Hmm.
but I guess I
Wow.
hadn't.
Amazing. So that's quite recently, right?
Yeah, I literally just graduated 3 weeks ago.
Wow. Wow. There is a place here at the wall behind you, I see, that you can place another certificate over there. Yeah. There's a good place over there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually up there already. It's I think
Okay.
it's that one in the very middle.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So speaking about digital transformation and probably AI, I mean, what are the major trends that you see right now in e-commerce, and how do you see this evolving in the future?
So you mentioned one of them, AI for sure is
Yeah.
one. I think another one is cybersecurity.
Mm.
Those two things are. Um, so I could, yeah. How do I? Where do I? Let me start with cybersecurity because that one's easy. I think historically, e-commerce guys, directors of e-commerce, VPs of e-commerce, uh, digital marketing managers, we typically focus on, what the job sounds like, but we don't focus on cybersecurity or privacy, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is just starting to change, and I think it has to change. I In 2018, so I every year I do these little things. I call it a personal deep dive, and I pick a topic and I dedicate a 100-hour minimum to learning about that topic. Minimum 100 hours, and I make myself, I go out and I curate all these different resources like blog articles and videos and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I do all this reading and I watch the videos and I learn about this topic at least 100 hours worth. In the year 2018, it was all about GDPR. So I got this GDPR certification and talked to a bunch of lawyers about it. And I was working for a company at the time that was impacted by GDPR, and so I implemented our GDPR policies at that company.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of a good segue. I think that's kind of what made me even more aware of not just privacy, but also the reasons why we want privacy, which in a lot of cases, in some cases, not all, in some cases, is kind of related to hackers attacking our systems, attacking our databases internally. And I was working for a small company at the time, and we didn't really have anybody who formally had that job. So I kind of figured, okay, well, I think it falls on me and our IT director. The two of us, we kind of saw eye to eye on that, which was good. And I just said, if we ever get hacked and if word gets out about us getting hacked, and everybody's gotten hacked, it's either you know it or you don't know it, but you've gotten hacked, okay, by somebody. And I think that can be very brand damaging. If you do that, it's all about, one of the most important things about e-commerce is trust. And it's always been that way. And it's going to be that way I think forever. It's always going to be that way. I don't think that trust is as big of an issue in a bricks and mortar environment, but when you're online, it's easier to get spoofed. It's easier to get hacked. It's easier for people to, engage or develop phishing attacks against you or your company.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really falls on us as leaders in the e-commerce space to not leave it, because it's so important. It's to not leave it to chance and to not leave it to just the IT department, because really, I don't think that unless you have the resources of, say, Target or Walmart or a really large company, you're never going to be able to guarantee your customers' total privacy or their total security. And so what you at least can do and what you at least should do, I think what you have a responsibility to the public, to your customers, to your company, to your brand. You have that responsibility to do everything that you can to educate your people internally, to educate your customers externally, and to make it known to hackers that we're not a sitting duck, and we're going to do everything we can to make you go somewhere else that's easier than us. Okay,
Yeah.
so those are kind of my thoughts on cybersecurity. And then so you mentioned AI. So I'll be honest with you, I don't consider myself an AI expert. I just started. I've always been aware of the existence of AI, but I know people who are way, 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 way more advanced than I am in their AI knowledge. But I do look at it in terms of marketing skills, marketing operations. And I think that a lot of marketers are a little too eager to embrace AI as a work tool. I think that, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about foundational knowledge. If your claim to fame, or your claim to your basis for saying I'm an ecom person, or I'm an ecom professional, is that you got an English degree and you've now been working in e-commerce as a copywriter for a few months. I'm sorry, but that doesn't impress me.
Yeah.
AI is going to someday be really great. It's in the last year, it has just exploded in terms of its capabilities. But I think that you still benefit tremendously from a good foundational knowledge of, not only English itself, but ideation. So I do use AI for ideation, and sometimes it will give me some information that I hadn't thought of before, and that's great. But what I would never ever do, and never ever recommend, is that you throw a prompt into ChatGPT 4 and say, hey, write me a content article about sapphire gemstones or something, right? And then just take that and publish it. I think you still have to go through a lengthy editing process and validation and verification process, and run it by genuine, true experts that have 20 years of experience in the gemology field or consumer electronics field, or whatever it is. Otherwise, your output is just going to sound silly. And so, this is a something I would caution both young people and executives is just like I say about e-com in general, temper your expectations, have realistic expectations. Don't think that AI is going to solve all of your problems. It might actually create some problems that you hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
And I think we're a few years away from being able to, really, really super, trust AI.
Yes, that maybe is ready for prime time and can do some real activities, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right, Rick. Specifically about your career, what are you proud of in your career?
Ooh. Well, there's a few things. I think one of the things that I guess if you ask me that question 20 years from now, I'm probably going to say there are a few people who have had work with me on my teams who I think, kind of like I took Mike Keskey, or Mike Keskey took me under his wing, and he mentored me. That is one of the most valuable experiences I've ever had. And it's kind of like that movie, Pay It Forward. So I try to pay it forward with my teams. I try to remove roadblocks for them.
Yes.
I try to educate them and pass on what I've learned. Like Yoda says, pass on what you have learned, right? So I try to do that. For me, the most rewarding thing, I think, aside from business accomplishments, is some of the human accomplishments and seeing somebody grow in their role. And I thoroughly believe that if you want to be successful, I think the thing to do is to hire some really smart people who, preferably have that foundational knowledge, like a marketing degree that I was talking about before. But then build on that. Have a program, an actual plan, and I always have a plan. I call it an IDP. Everybody on my teams always has an individual development plan, and I want them to go through this plan, have discipline, the discipline to work on it every day, or at least a few hours each week, and do things to make them better. Big believer in cross training. Huge. I love cross training. So I want my email manager to understand PPC, and I want the PPC person to understand online marketing or online merchandising, and so on. Those are just a couple of examples. But I think when you surround yourself with people who are so well developed that the business almost operates without your input, or minimizes the need for you to be there, then that's really awesome. And I have two other mentors who I really love, and I'll mention them briefly.
Yeah.
Another one was another Best Buy guy. He was one of my first store managers. His name was Ken Wells, and Ken was our new store manager. He walked in one day and he sat down with his three assistant managers. I was one of them, and he said, "Guys, my goal is to teach you everything that I know, and then I'm going to go golf. I'm going to golf a lot. I don't want to be in the store more than 30 hours a week. I'm going to let you guys run everything. You guys need me, you call me, but make the decision or talk amongst yourself. You decide. Company's not going to go out of business just because you decided something and made a bad decision. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to teach you everything I know, and I'm going to go golf a lot." And he did. That worked. And it was a great experience for me. It was something that I remember 30 years later. I still remember it. And then the other one was so another guy who I just love and respect so much. His name was Tony Weiss. Tony Weiss used to be the CEO of CompUSA. CompUSA was right down the road from the Best Buy that I worked at, and I got recruited by Tony, and he hired me. He was the store manager in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin store at the time, but he went on to become the CEO of the company a few years later. And Tony was this really, really, really smart guy. And I'll tell you a story. I just love this story because it really validates cross training, which I'm a big believer in. And Tony is the person who made me become this huge believer in cross training. Okay. So we had a Kmart store manager. His name was Phil Way, and Phil came into our 7:30 a.m. Tuesday morning managers meeting one day, and he said, "Tony, your store is so quiet. Nobody ever uses the PA system. Why is that?" And Tony looks at Phil and he says, "Well, Phil, it's because I train my staff so that they can respond to and handle every situation. So they never need to call for a manager." And one of the ways that he did that was, like, we have the B2B business in CompUSA. You had the corporate pickup counter in the front of the store. You had the corporate sales team in the back, and Tony required them to work each other's roles for a minimum, a few hours a week at least, so they understood each other's jobs. And that made them communicate better, understand each other better, understand the requirements of each other's responsibilities better. So very, very successful. And so, I owe that philosophy, belief in that philosophy to Tony. And I have done that in every job that I've ever had since then. And it just makes everybody work together better, understand each other better, and so on. So, people development, that's what I'm proud of.
Nice.
There's a few other things, and I won't go into a long story. The short story is, launching Circuit City as an e-commerce enabled website. This huge Fortune 500 company launching e-commerce there. I'm very proud of that. There was a company called Jewelry Television that I worked for that was branching out and creating these new, we call them vertical businesses, and so they were new to the company, and I developed a few of them. One of them, which was called The Vault, it was very different from everything else that we had done. So new business, new processes, new product, and I launched that with the help of a fairly sizable team, and it was very, very, very successful, and the customers loved it. Customers really loved it, and it was very, very profitable. So very, very proud of that. There's a few other things, but I'll shut up now.
And it seems that you were lucky to work with some exceptional leaders, right, throughout the years, and not all, but appreciate it, understand it, and absorb all that knowledge, right? So that's another impressive characteristics of you. And Rick, this is the part of the episode where I ask you about a fun fact about yourself that most of your professional network are not aware
of. Let's see, what can I tell you? I talked about the consulting already. So I guess I'll tell you about the year 1995 was a kind of a good year for me, an interesting year for me. A lot happened. I switched companies in that year. I ended that year at one company, ended up, the next company after that is when I started at Circuit City. But first, in the company before Circuit City, I wrote a book. So I've written one book in my life. It was about the internet, and it was about 160 pages long. And I don't even have any copies of it myself anymore. But the thing that I am proud of about that book is that in those 160 pages, I wrote about why the internet was invented and what it was used for. And all these years later, I think that if you were to go back and look at it, if you could find a copy, you would say, oh, these things are still true. Like I talked about content being king. I know that's
Wow.
I still believe that that's true. I talked about the reasons for the internet existing, which were to educate, to communicate, to entertain, and I still think that those three things, entertain, communicate, educate, are still the primary reasons that the internet exists. And then the fourth reason, which didn't come along until significantly later, was commerce. So that was not something so that would be the one big change. And then the other thing about that year was the job transition to Circuit City, and then I wrote the code for CircuitCity.com's first homepage ever, and submitting that to corporate on zip disks. I still think zip disks are the most awesome thing in the world.
Yeah.
So that was a fun year for me.
Fun. Wow. Everything on the same year. Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great, Rick. So where people can find you?
Oh, so I'm still doing my freelance consulting, fractional CMO work, and I do kind of a wide variety of things there. The website URL is www.smallbizcoach.biz. It's a .biz website.
Yeah.
Smallbizcoach.biz.
Great. So we will share it in the show notes. Rick, thank you so much. Really, really interesting. Really appreciate your time, and well done on an amazing career, and great things obviously are still to come, right?
I hope so. I hope so.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode. Your support means the world to us. If today's episode has been insightful for you, consider sharing it with someone who would also benefit. Even one share can make a big difference. Looking to elevate your e-commerce game? Discover Vimy, a multi-channel e-commerce platform that will transform your business with the power of shoppable video. Visit us at vimy.net to learn more. It's Vimy, VIMMI.net. Thank you for being part of our journey. Stay tuned for more invaluable insights in our next episode.